Good evening and welcome to Candidate Conversation, your community, your vote. I'm Habib Rahman with you, and I have Kalita Mitra.
Hi.
She's journalist and
Thank
CEO
you.
of URL Media. As usual, welcome.
Thank you. This might be one of our last ones. Famous last words.
Famous last one.
All right.
You are in next?
I am.
We know somebody.
I am. This is a 𝗔𝗯𝗶𝗃. It has sparkles on it.
Sparkles on it, right?
Yeah,
Makes you feel even better.
Of course.
That's special.
Yes.
Right. And we have somebody else who we will introduce to our audience.
Yeah, I like
who
her
was
outfit
at the parade.
Yeah.
Okay, in a little bit. But let's tonight we sit down with one of the candidates seeking to represent New York's 7th Congressional District in Washington, D.C. New York City Council member 𝗔𝗯𝟏. She's an immigrant, a mother, and the first woman and the first immigrant to represent Western Queens on New York City's council. 𝗔𝗯𝟏 has built her political career around issues ranging from affordable housing, education, to immigrant rights, and government accountability. During her time in the City Council, she has highlighted her efforts to secure funding for schools, expand housing opportunities, and advocate for working families. Today, she is taking that message, or those messages, to the congressional stage at what she calls a vision for a lifetime of care, including affordability, childcare, paid family leave, healthcare access, and support for seniors. Her campaign comes at a pivotal moment of New York and the nation. You will know in a little bit why. You already know, voters are grappling with concerns about the economy, immigration, housing affordability, healthcare costs, and future direction of the Democratic Party, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, in a competitive race to succeed longtime Representative Nydia Velázquez. 𝗔𝗯𝟏 argues that her experience as a local elected official and a daughter of immigrant makes her uniquely qualified to fight for working families in Congress. Tonight, we'll discuss with her vision for her district, or for this district, her record in public office, the challenges she faces in New York City, and the people we face, and why she believes she is the right choice to represent NY7 in Washington. Please join me welcoming 𝗔𝗯𝟏. Thank you for making time. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum. It's so good to see you all. My name is 𝗔𝗯𝟏. I'm currently a city council member. I represent Long Island City, Sunnyside, Woodside, and Astoria. I'm an immigrant. I came to this country in 1998, and I'm in my 3rd term in city council. I remember when I landed in JFK with just 3 luggage bags with my family. And I remember when my dad, who was about 180, 200 pounds, who was a heavier man as a businessman in South Korea, went from that, and within a matter of 2 months, he was so thin because he was working all kinds of odd jobs, unloading and loading boxes at liquor stores, at dry cleaners, delis, any shift he could get, he did. My mom was a professor in South Korea, and then she very quickly became a nail salon worker, where my brother and I would wave to her every time we would go home from school, and we would see her washing people's feet, and I just remember my brother crying because he felt so sorry for her. But I will never forget my mom's words to me and my brother, that there is no shame in the work that she was doing, that there is no shame for making a living in this country, and that for America, that if we studied hard and we worked hard, that there's an opportunity for every single one of us.
Can we, Julie, first of all, welcome. And I just want to say that usually journalists and electeds are on different sides, but clearly Julie and I have something in common today. We're on the same team.
And I want to tell the audience, she's the one who was at the next parade today.
Yeah, she was at the parade. I'm just pretending I was at the parade.
You had a representative.
Yeah, I'm representing here in Queens.
There you go.
We got our moment as well. I do just want to dive in. You're a 3rd term New York City Councilwoman. Why transition from the local areas that you've been overseeing to federal office? What prompted that move?
As an immigrant, when the migrant crisis broke out, I remember I got the phone call from the mayor's office, and they said, hey, can you come to Port Authority to welcome all these migrants that are coming in by bus from Texas, because we're one of the few immigrants elected. And I will never forget the woman who came with a baby fresh off the boat, off the bus, who was probably less than 2 days old. And she told me that she gave birth outside of the bus. They cut her umbilical cord with a regular scissor. Then they pushed her onto the bus. And she stood the whole ride from Texas to New York without sitting down once, because she was in so much pelvic pain and she still could not rest. I can't imagine as a mom of two of what that must have been like. And that is why I opened up the highest amount of migrant shelters. We enrolled the highest amount of migrant students into our schools. And I also started the first ever domestic workers co-op so that immigrant women can work as nannies, housekeepers, and home care workers, pay taxes to the New York State through ITA numbers, and also have a pathway to citizenship because they were entrepreneurs. So that's just an inkling of what we were able to accomplish together as a city council. But I want to do more because when it comes to immigration reform, abolishing ICE, and making sure that we have clear pathway to citizenship to end family separation, that is only through federal legislation and federal comprehensive reform. It can't happen on the city level because it's just not in our jurisdiction.
There's a lot to unpack there, but we're going to come back and revisit that. But, you're going to Washington, right?
We're trying to. Yeah.
Well, should you get elected, right?
Yeah.
So thank you for correcting me. Okay, so let's focus where we are today, NY7, right? So you are seeking to move from New York City Council to the Congress. What is the single biggest problem facing residents? The residents here are facing of NY7 that you believe Washington has failed to address, and how would you tackle it differently?
Universal healthcare, for sure, because it's truly something that crosses all boundaries of age, work, whatever your work profession may be, and also your age. Whether you're just fresh born to you're in retirement age, everyone needs access to healthcare. And what we're seeing in the big, beautiful bill, which is quite ugly under Trump, is that we're going to see over 100,000 seniors who are immigrants lose their healthcare access. And what we've seen is dramatic cuts to Obamacare, which allowed us to have healthcare. Right now, the American system, our healthcare insurance is directly connected to your mode of employment. So if you are not employed, or you're a gig worker, you're a freelancer, or you're working on the table because you're undocumented, you're not going to be able to go to the hospital. And it's truly a matter of life or death. And for immigrants like myself, we know how difficult it is. When my parents got into a car crash, the first thing that my mom said to me was, don't call 911. Because she knew it was going to cost a few $1,000s. She was like, if we can walk or if we could take a cab, we will do that. Yeah. Unless it's a dire emergency. It's the last thing that people want to do.
I mean, there's a lot here. I mean, when we talk about Medicare or Medicaid, from the safety net, generally speaking, and you said it's one of the most highest priority in your agendas. I get frustrated when people talk about bits and pieces. They say, okay, insulin is going to be $35. What about the rest? Why do I have to worry about the health care? Tell me that. So we're going to come back, but I think you have a follow-up question.
I do have a follow-up question, which is that, of course, President Trump and his feelings about healthcare remain a dominant force in politics. And so as you kind of plot your agenda and what's propelling you to run for federal office, I'm wondering how you would work across the aisle to enact the change in a more progressive agenda that you hold versus, honestly, where some of the rest of the country is right now.
For sure. And we've already exemplified that as a city council member. I was the first council member to get all 51 sign-ons, including Republicans, for the Affordable Connectivity Program to Senator Schumer within my tenure. And I've also shown in really contentious projects like One Long Island City, a rezoning project, we passed that unanimously. It is very rare in this body that Republicans and Common Sense Caucus members vote for rezonings of that size. But I've always been very conscientious to make sure that I stay out of the fray. I've always built my coalition and my relationships one-on-one, making sure that I have trust with my colleagues, and also making sure that even if we disagree on an issue, that it's not personal, not attacking people on a personal level, but only speaking on the issue itself with logical reasons on why it does not make sense for my community and why we disagree. And that's the same thing that I would do in Congress. Within 3 days of announcing my run for Congress, I was already on the Hill. And I stood outside where the votes were ending, and I shook hands with as many Congress members as possible 3 days after announcing, so that people could put a name to a face and that they know that I'm a serious candidate, that I'm here to build coalitions and relationships so that I can pass legislation, which is why within 3 terms I've already passed 14 pieces of legislation and also brought home over $2 billion of investment and also built 32,000 units of housing.
Yeah, I mean, you ended up with housing. So I'm just going to go there once again. I mean, it's one of those hot potato issues. Everybody is just saying, we have to do this, we have to do that. We have shortage, we have affordability issues. we need to build, we need to lower the interest rate. So many voters, but we've been hearing this, right? But many voters and prospective voters who are actually listening to you now, feel that despite years of Democratic control in New York City, New York State, both Democratic control. Forget about the nationwide issues. If we just look into this state itself, in New York State, housing remains unaffordable. Why should voters believe a Democrat such as you, especially, can finally solve the affordability crisis? And what is your plan?
I've already broken the record in recent city council history for building and approving the highest amount of housing and affordable housing than the borough of Queens has done in the last 2 decades. So that's how we've been able to get 32,000 units of housing. And I've also opened the highest amount of shelters, because when you're housing insecure, we have to make sure that you have a roof over your head that's going to give you some relief before you find your next permanent residence. In addition to that, I've also opened the first ever housing clinic, so that anyone who is facing eviction or having any issues with their landlord, that they have access to free legal services right here in my office in multiple languages, so that you are not taken advantage of and not being exploited just because you simply cannot afford a lawyer.
So we've asked many of the candidates we've been interviewing in these conversations about their own housing situation. And I know in your case, it's been in the news recently. So I just want to unpack, where are you living? How much do you pay as a monthly either rent or mortgage? And then maybe we can dive into some of the recent headlines that were made about your living situation.
Sure. I want to make it clear that we've responded to every single one of those fabricated, completely disgusting defamation headlines, and we've responded with our lawyer for every single one of them. So for example, we know that they filed a case, and if you look at the legal documents, it's actually Jennifer 1. My name is Julie 1. And also that case was pulled by the landlord by himself and discontinued by Friday, and they ran the story on Sunday.
So where are you living right now?
I live in a different apartment, not in the apartment that they listed. I don't live there, and I live in a different apartment, and I live in my district. And I pay $4,000, like I had said on record, is how much I pay for rent, which is extremely high. So you're still in the
same home that you've been in for the last few months?
No, I live somewhere else.
Okay.
And because of the safety of my children, I don't disclose to anybody where I currently publicly live, because we've had multiple cases, which is also in police reports where myself, Donovan Richards, the borough president, as well as the assembly member of this district, Stephen Raga, have had very close death threats where there was a shooting of somebody else, but they were trying to kill all 3 of us. And because of that, I'm extremely careful now.
So just to clarify, you have moved, you're paying $4,000 a month in rent. And then can I just rewind a little bit when we get to your origin story? What is your connection to the district? You chose to move here. I believe you were working, were you working in Washington earlier? Or you were working somewhere else? So what is the appeal of the neighborhood? And give us a little flavor of that.
Well, there's a lot. Sunnyside actually had the highest amount of Korean American immigrants in the 80s, more than Los Angeles. And a lot of them moved for the hospital, Elmhurst Hospital, as well as the textile factories, because a lot of Korean women have been working in textile companies, even in Korea, before they were brought over. And for me, my family and I first landed at JFK. My uncle owned dry cleaners in Astoria. And when you look at the awnings of Sunnyside, especially when a lot of businesses go out of business and the awnings come down, you'll see a lot of them in Korean signs, especially in Sunnyside, Woodside, and Jackson Heights. That's where all the Korean churches are as well. This was the enclave of Korean Americans in Queens and in New York City in the 90s and early 2000s. And for me, my husband was also born and raised in Woodside. This is kind of just where a lot of Korean Americans have always gathered for their places of faith and also their culture. And it was also where all the after school programs were for a lot of Korean students who were preparing for their SATs and SATs. When I went to college upstate, and in my senior year, I was recruited off of campus to work for IBM, a tech company, and they took me into the federal practice because I had studied international relations, English textual studies, and poli-sci as a minor. And that's what brought me to DC. And once Trump took office the first time, I kind of took myself away from that, because as a Democrat and as an immigrant myself, what I saw and heard on the news and of the president of the United States saying about Asian Americans and immigrants overall, it was not something that I wanted to be involved in, even on tertiary sense as a contractor. So I no longer wanted to be a federal contractor, and I moved back to New York, where I spent most of my life.
And just what prompted the move to this area? I'm just trying to get the track record because there have been the accusations of not having paid rent in a certain
It's
building.
not true.
Okay, so
And I'm telling you, it's not true. And we have the legal papers to prove that. And I'm happy to provide it for you because we have all 3 legal papers. And it is untrue. That's a false accusation. And as I've said on the papers, it is a political smear piece, which started to happen as the super PACs went live and all the smearing that's happening for all 3 candidates. That is the result of what happens when you allow dark money to enter our races. And over the last 2 days, we've seen over $600,000 be spent. And all these super PACs are undisclosed, dark money. And no matter how much my opponents say, no, these are good super PACs, there is no such thing as a good super PAC in this country, because a super PAC is simply an undisclosed vehicle where you don't have to say who is donating, who is running this, and also there's no cap. That means that a single donor can donate more than $1 million per donation. And that is why we're seeing over $2 million of dark money being spent. And if you look at what's in the press right now and what's hitting our mailboxes, what's being fed to us online, all of these negative ads are just dark money super PACs, and who knows who it's from. And we as voters and as elected officials, we won't know. That's why super PACs are extremely bad. And I've stood by my word that we have to end Citizens United, and we have to stop super PAC spending once and for all and have campaign finance reform so that just like the city and the state, we have matching funds so that for every $1, you get $8. And you have a spending cap so that each candidate can only spend the same amount, which completely levels out the playing field. And it truly allows the voters to decide, I believe in this person because of their track record and what they've accomplished and what I believe their vision is for our country.
the campaign finance issue, Habib, we've seen come up over and over in our interviews.
That's horrible.
I wonder if you want to take it from here. But
I mean, I was listening to you. You know, it seemed like very confident, but you know, there are people who are saying Julia won. By the way, Julia and Julie are not the same person. That's what you're saying. What
Julie won. My name is Julie.
You are Julie Won.
Yeah,
and it's
But
Jennifer.
It's Jennifer.
Yeah.
It's two different people.
And
not the
also,
same
there's
person.
no executed lease. I'm not
Right.
signed.
So
I'm not even listed as a tenant.
That's out of the way. That's no more question on that. You clarified everything,
Yep.
and I think people deserve to know this.
Yeah.
Especially if it is smear campaign
Yep.
against you, right? Now there are questions. You talked about super PACs, so you are not affiliated with any super PACs. You
Nope.
are not taking any money from any super
Nope.
PACs. No APAC, no nothing.
No corporate PACs, no fossil fuels, no
Not-
real estate
no
board of
APAC
New York,
either.
𝗏𝗏𝗏. No.
For genocide, against genocide.
I'm against genocide of any kind, of any people, anywhere.
Well,
Bad.
It's usually
your people were
calling it the
your
genocide that's
people.
been
People
the,
don't talk about Vietnam War. I'm sorry, Korean War, because it happened between the Second World War and the Vietnam War. It's a forgotten war.
Yeah.
You know, in 2 years, I think in 2 years, 3 million people died.
Yeah.
Korean War. Nobody talks about it. It's a forgotten war.
Yeah.
Okay, so we cleared that up. Let's go back to policies again. All right. So now, you just mentioned Trump. You know, he's still there, by the way. Okay. So President Trump remains a dominant force in national politics. There's no debate on that. If elected to Congress, what would be your strategy for working across the aisle when necessary, while you also standing up to policies that you disagree with?
It's really important that you have personal relationships with your colleagues the same way that I have made sure that I spent time with them and had time to understand what their priorities are in their districts. Right. It's going to be the same way that I'm going to have to work with the New York delegation, because this district is the most progressive in all of New York State and possibly the whole country.
Yeah, no
and I'm going to make sure that they understand that and that I am a representative of my people. And my people are against any funding for Israel. They're against they want to see more AI regulations, and they want to see more affordable housing, etc., and against fossil fuels, and want environmental justice. And those are the things that I'm going to clearly lay out for my colleagues so that they understand that I'm not just trying to be here to virtue signal, but this is truly what we believe in, and here are the priorities that we're going to put together, and this is how we're going to move forward. Yeah. And no matter what, the way that I've won my elections is very feral progressive, that is independent, beholden to nobody, is that the moment that I win this primary, I'm going to be the first one to call everybody, even people who've endorsed against me, every single nonprofit that are in the district, and I'm going to spend the whole entire summer and the fall, meeting with every single one of them to say, okay, now let's all get back together because we don't want to be divisive and we want to be a single community of every faith leader, every single religion, every single every single ethnicity, that we have gatherings to really understand what are our connected priorities, what are our common denominators, and how will we prioritize them. And that's what I'll bring with me to Washington.
Yeah, I think you raise a good point that this race and being so crowded has really created kind of some divisions with who's endorsing who. And,
it's very difficult to understand.
And then you have Brooklyn and Queens, but
mashed.
it's Brooklyn versus
in some
Queens.
places, overlapping some places. It's crazy.
And also, I think it's been so negative. I don't know if you've seen some of the negative mailers that the super PACs have sent out, the negative digital
The reason
ads.
I had to ask you the APAC question because I think I saw something along that line in New York Post. Not that New York Post is highly regarded.
That's where it comes from.
So
about Antonio Reynoso.
I was talking about the housing situation as the New York Post, but I'm sure that on the political
side, also New York Post, their accusation that you are maybe taking APAC money, and that's why I had to ask you this.
That's all public.
Right. So
that's all public. I don't have any outside spending, so I have no IEs from any PACs, any super PACs at all.
Yeah. So no super PAC whatsoever.
Yeah. Of any kind. I'm not taking any of their money. But I do know that there's been a lot of conversation about Antonio Reynoso and the APAC, Super PAC funding. And but overall, right, it's clear that it's kind of the way that I see it is like nuclear proliferation, where if everyone is like, oh, you have a gun, so I need a gun. Because what I'm hearing from my opponent is, well, I'm not going to bring a paperclip to a gunfight. And they're saying that Claire Valdez has a gun, basically. But essentially, that's the opposite of de-escalation. If we're trying to have peace and de-escalate as progressives, everybody put down their gun. Because if the super PACs weren't involved to begin with, I don't think it would have gotten half as nasty as it is right now, where there's, I think when I checked this morning, there's over $200,000 being spent just for negative ads against each other.
No kidding. You're not gonna make good friends with Trump. Do you know why?
Why?
You're talking against the Second Amendment.
Well, I was going to say, with all the gun talk, it's interesting. I know we're up against time. I want to make sure that we get to an issue that's
locally
near to many local organizations, and you mentioned nonprofits. So the sector here in Queens, I would say across the country, has really felt decimated by federal cuts. And this is an area that it does feel like our representatives who are representing New York City might be able to make a better case for some of us right now. So I just wondered what your strategy there is, what you're hearing on the ground. Is there a plan for many of the nonprofits and social services organizations that have relied on federal dollars to really kind of save New York over and over, whether it's, food insecurity, education programs, and what your thoughts on that are?
It's extremely disappointing, and it's heartbreaking. As someone who grew up on public benefits, it's extremely essential that they continue to be funded, especially after school programs. But we're seeing funding cuts across the board from the federal level, state level, and now on the city level. We're currently negotiating the budget. I have served on the budget negotiation team for the first 4 years of my council career, which is how I've brought home over $2 billion of investment to my district alone. Just for expense funding. So expense funding is a programmatic funding that nonprofits use to do our services on the ground. In last year alone, I brought home over $1 million of that. And that went to all of our local nonprofits. And that's how we have free after school programs. That's how we have immigrant services. That's how we have legal services, housing services, and so much more, the arts and culture. And that's what I'll continue to fight for. On the federal level, we have a real fight to be had. And we have to make sure that we're not being punished by Trump and his friends for being a sanctuary city protecting immigrants, because we're seeing funding cuts as a punishment of that. But nothing should be retaliatory in that way in this country, a democracy. And I would use both the bully pulpit, I'll be here with you all, calling this out, and also making sure that we're organizing our colleagues, an inside-outside organizing game, also with our coalition members, to make sure that we're out in the streets protesting, organizing, and also negotiating inside to make sure that we're protecting funding for New York State.
You said quite a few things, but one of those things that's mostly talked about and the really, really hot issue is immigration. You just touched on this right now.
Yep.
Right? So as a daughter of immigrants, you have spoken about just now, we're just protecting immigrants' communities, right? How would you balance a stronger border enforcement and maintaining a humane and fair immigration system?
We have to make sure that we abolish ICE overall, because the billions of dollars that are being spent, and also the contracting that is given to people, private contractors like Geo Group, which is running Delaney Hall right now with inhumane services and inhumane treatment, is unfathomable. That people are making millions of dollars through ICE detention. What we also have seen over the last 2 years, especially, which has gone on in New York City in recent history, but even more so just apparent to us in the last year, is that it's clear that we have to separate the civil enforcement from criminal enforcement. It is a very different story if you've done criminal harm that is extremely dangerous for humanity and society, and for you to just go after the churro ladies who are selling churros on the subway to survive.
Yeah.
To a 6-year-old, 𝗓𝗠ance was a Chinese boy that was abducted and detained at a bus stop in Astoria, right here in this district. Those children and minors should not be separated from their family. And those children or minors are not a danger to society. There is no excuse for you to say that they are criminal. They are not, and they have no criminal records. And for a lot of these adults, what we've seen statistically is that they had no criminal record. It was just a civil enforcement. And what we've seen over and over again the last few years, when we've gone to support and solidarity at 26 Federal Plaza, when a lot of these migrants are going in for their court hearing because they want to have a legal process to become citizens, is that even without a lawful order, a court order to say that they should be detained or deported, they're being detained anyway, and they are being deported no matter what.
I mean, it's a good point. The immigration is a civil matter, but we have turned it into a criminality.
Yes.
Well, we also have turned the act of crossing the border into the criminality, the lone criminality, when actually the right to seek asylum is a perfectly legal.
And the hardest thing,
matter,
you know, you are going to be in Washington. The hardest thing is nobody is touching a comprehensive immigration reform.
Right. Well, I think
they're just putting Band-Aid patches here and there, and that's about it.
And I covered Washington in the early 2000s. I was a reporter at the Washington Post, and we look at some of the most right-wing proposals from that period of time.
Of course, George Bush.
And they would be considered so humane and coveted right now by pro-immigration forces.
Of course.
That's where we are.
I'm totally with you. I'm totally with you. I remember that very important phrase, George Bush. Are you with them or with us? Do you remember? And then they introduced the Patriot Act.
Yeah, the Patriot Act.
Oh my God. What a horrendous thing to do.
Even during Trump's re-election, they literally had signs that said, deport them all.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. If you're not white. But yes, please.
So, well, I know we're wrapping up. I do want to just get a little bit into your kind of reflections of your time in City Council. What are you most proud of? What do you kind of say, if I could do that over, I would approach this differently? Any lessons learned there?
I would say one of the biggest lessons learned is, one, how a bill is passed. I think in our council member jurisdictions, what you should know about every single council member is that they have 3 powers. The first one is passing laws, the laws that you abide by as a New York City resident, and also budget, how our city spends over $128 billion a year, and 30% of that is doled out to nonprofits, etc. And thirdly, land use. Through learning the land use text amendments and rezoning laws, I've now been able to accomplish building an immense amount of housing, 32,000 units of housing built and approved, but also the community give back. So for example, we're able to now build a free masjid as a donation from the developer for the Long Island City residents, because there have been so many Muslim neighbors who have come to me and said, Councilmember 1, I need somewhere to pray, but the school has rejected us, the nonprofits have rejected us, and now we're just praying outside of the park. But we want somewhere to pray all year round, and through the rezoning process, we were able to achieve that goal, and we look forward to seeing that masjid built in the next 5 years.
Yeah. We are almost towards the end of our program. I really wanted to have this, 2 hours long discussion. I mean, maybe, after the election, we're going to have you back again. We're going to have a long discussion, because there are many things unanswered, unquestioned. There's so many challenges we have. I mean, national debt is one of those, but we don't have time for this. What I want to ask you is this. People who are watching you today, and will watch you in social media later on, what's your message to them? What would you tell them? Why would they vote you over other candidate? That's one thing. If you had one last message to your constituents, what would be your message? And overall, what's your message to the people how they can find you, what they should do, and should not wait around and do nothing until the time passes and there's no time to vote. And especially the voter turnaround this time is very low.
Thank you so much to both Epicenter and TBN for having me. I am running for Congress to make sure that every immigrant, especially immigrant women who have had a miscarriage while in detention because they were denied medical care, is taken care of. And for every American U.S. citizen that has held the line in protection of their immigrant neighbors, I'm running for Congress for every woman who has put a pause on her career and her dreams so that she could take care of her children or her elderly parents, because it's simply cheaper for them to let go of their careers than to pay for someone to do so. I'm running for Congress for every worker who wakes up in the morning wondering if they're going to be laid off because of AI automations. As the only immigrant mother and also the only tech worker in this race, I'm going to continue to fight for all of us, and I'm going to make sure that I use all of my skills that I've learned from being a professional in tech, as well as all the skills that I've amassed the last few years as a city council member on the federal level. And you have my commitment that I will continue to be transparent, that I'll continue to be honest, and I'll continue to make sure that I hold on to your trust. Because when we all promised on March 10th that we would not take super PAC funding, I kept that promise as the only candidate not taking super PAC money. Every single donation is from an individual that is transparent, that you can read, you know where they work, you know their names. And that is how our elections should be. No billionaire or millionaire should be able to purchase our election and buy our votes. So I thank you for making sure that our community, especially the South Asian community, is aware of the election coming up. Vote on June 23rd, and you can find your poll site online at findmypollsite.nyc. And you can also visit my website at juliewon.com, JULIEWON.com.
Julie, thank you so much for making time and coming here. We had a really great discussion, and we would love to have you back again after the election, regardless of the results or whatever happens in the election.
I look forward to debriefing with both of you.
So do we. Kalita, we have to say goodbye to everybody.
This might be it. I mean, we keep doing more.
Yeah.
But this really might be it.
We just say, this is it.
Yeah.
This is it. But we just keep going,
We're holding up democracy.
So I'm going to say goodbye to everybody else.
Yeah.
Once again, thank you. Good luck to your election. And we'll see how this works out. And you guys are the voters. Go and vote. Regardless who you pick, it's up to you. This is your civic duty. Take part. It is your chance to pick your candidate. And this is the time. See you in the next episode. Good night.